Gupta. I would now hand over the reins to our program director, Dr. Amishwara. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kashish. And this is very interesting for me. We all know Dr. Sudeep Gupta. He is right now the director in ACTRAC TMH. And Dr. Sudeep wears so many hats that it's impossible to describe in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes. But most important thing, if I have to describe Sudeep in the field of medical oncology, I would say that in any webinar, any conference, if Dr. Sudeep Gupta gets up and says, excuse me, but I do not agree with what you people have said, I think there is nobody in India who would not listen to that comment. Everybody would say, Acha, Sudeep ne bola hai. There must be something in that. And that is, I think, one of the major contribution which Sudeep has added is the authenticity with which he presents his own data and the data from all around the world, and he gives us guidance from time to time. It is my honor to ask him or grill him with few questions. But before I do that, I wanted to invite few of our colleagues to say few words about Sudeep. In fact, Dr. Raghu sir gave us little more extra time. And can I request Dr. Senthil Rajappa to talk about Sudeep with brief words, few words?
So Amish, can we, just talk about the topic of the interview? I'm 100%
No,
certain that the way
just two comments. Sudeep, just two comments. 2 minutes.
the way
You have
the
to
way
bear
you
with
are
us.
the way you are speaking, I think it is time for me to retire.
No.
It seems like it.
No, 2 minutes.
Amish, I
Sudeep.
don't want to miss my chance.
Correct.
Okay, Senthil first
You
and then
already told
Amit.
us, so we better speak.
Yeah.
Our
Anyway,
time to
thanks,
talk.
Amish. I'll be really brief as I usually am. Though I haven't trained under Dr. Sudeep, he's always been a teacher from far, wherever, when it's a meeting or a webinar or whatever it is. And as Amish rightly pointed out, I think the character that makes him stand apart is the courage, the confidence, and more importantly, the conviction that he has when he gets up and says that whatever we all accept as proven is not actually what the fact is.
So true.
Right? And I like it when he says, I will stick my neck out and say. Right? So I'm sure, Dr. Sudeep, you will say that again today for something in my panel. You're there in my panel. I'm looking forward to grilling you a little bit because I've got some specific questions for you. Keep doing your work. No, it's not time for you to retire. It's important for you to teach people like me how to analyze and at least try to be a little as what you are and, being critical of what we see, hear, and read. Thanks so much, Amish.
Thank you, Senthil. And Amit, can you say a few things?
Yeah, so Sudeep, finally, so I get to say something. Sudeep, this is how Sudeep looks to many people. Don't look at him. This is presenting at gynecology. This is how we actually look like in the panel when he's talking. Is Shona Nag talking? Hamari bari aayega. Shit scared when Sudeep is going to ask the question. Jokes apart, he's very respected. He's a very well-read and balanced oncologist. He's a mentor for me and mentor for many. I can always call him at any point of time and seek advice. Never call him on WhatsApp. He doesn't take WhatsApp. He takes only messages. Very fair and balanced. Reminds me of good things. NEGM, JCO, master of randomized trial. He would always say not cut and dry, spot on. I don't think that is correct. Let me show you the data and see it is exactly opposite of what you said. Today he said, Holy Grail, what the hell is PATH-CR? And in my opinion, MANDACT is better than any other trial. In the end, I'm just honored to be your friend. Thanks, Sudeep.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you very much. And Ajit sir, this is not the Lifetime Achievement Award for Sudeep. I'll tell you why this live interview. Sudeep refused to moderate, refused to give any lecture. He just said that, let me stand in one corner and give whatever opinion. But as we all know, we all love to hear Sudeep's view. And without much further ado, Sudeep, let me start grilling you now with the first question.
So Amish, can I just share my screen in the meantime?
Yeah.
And before you begin, I just want to thank you and everyone else, Senthil and Amit. I am 100% certain that I'm not deserving of such high praise and such words. But I'm extremely humbled, and I'm delighted to be your friend. And I'm completely overwhelmed by the appreciation that I've received from my colleagues. It's invaluable, and it is something that I will always cherish. So thank you
Right.
very much.
So Sudeep, if you want to stop hearing praises about you, you should start accepting moderator's role more often. Then we would not do all these things. Okay. My first question when Sudeep shares, in fact, in the last 1 year, if I have to remember one word which changes practice is hazard ratio. And Dr. Senthil's lecture after lecture, I feel Senthil is so glued on the word hazard ratio, and I'm sure he will talk in his panel also. And Sudeep, it is rightly so also.
Hazardous ratio, Amish.
It is rightly so. Sudeep, so I wanted to ask you first question, how do you view hazard ratio? And when we say any practice changing papers, hazard ratio of 0.19, say in lung cancer with osimertinib, to hazard ratio of 0.8, but both can be practice changing. So I wanted to know from you that how do you view this hazard ratio in your clinical practice, especially when you want to change practice? Sudeep, over to you.
So thank you very much for asking me that question. I believe my screen is shared. This is, one picture that I took from a book that I very much like. And I just wanted to share with you that you can see two survival curves. One is hand drawn by me and the other one is from the book. And you can see the survival one corresponds to what is called a hazard rate. And hazard rate is essentially the instantaneous probability of death in any arm of a study, provided the patient has survived up to that point. So in an exponential distribution, which is the commonly the one that is assumed, it is assumed that the hazard rate stays constant throughout the trial for that particular arm of the study. So you can see here survival 1 and hazard rate 1, which is a straight line, the hazard rate 1. So it is a hazard of dying, the instantaneous hazard of dying. And you can see the survival 2, which is slightly higher, and the corresponding hazard rate is slightly lower. So I want to draw your attention to the right of that picture, and I have shown you that the delta in survival, let's say at 5 years, is the percentage difference between those two arms. And on the left of on the left of that picture, you can see that there are two vertical arrows that I have drawn, and the ratio of those arrows is what is called the hazard ratio. That is the hazard ratio. So now let me show you, this is an example of a hazard rate and a hazard ratio. So let's say that the arm 1 of the study, and this is the exact hazard rate that I calculated for one particular trial, and it is to the 16th decimal point. And you can see that the hazard rate is 0.023, etc., etc. And in the arm 2, it is 0.020. That's the instantaneous probability of dying, having survived to the previous, just prior to that point in one of the two, in either arm of that study. And the ratio of those two hazard rates is 0.81. And the proportional benefit in disease-free survival, because the hazard ratio is 0.81, is 19%. There's a 19% lesser chance of either dying or relapsing. And the p-value is, of course, 0.05. So let me ask you, Amish, let me put you on the spot. Which study is this?
How do I know, Sudeep? Aisa mat karo.
I had to put you on the spot because you decided to do me. But this is the actual hazard rate, and let me show you. This is the Affinity trial. There was a 19% proportional reduction in the rate of death or relapse, and the absolute delta in disease-free survival was 93.2% versus 94.1%, which is 0.9%. So now I just wanted to convey to everyone that the proportional reduction in a survival percentage is essentially the ratio of the hazard rates. And the ratio of the hazard rate is hazard rate 1 divided by hazard rate 2. And that, for example, here was 81%, and the proportional reduction was 19%. But that may not correlate with or in our minds, the benefit that we ascribe to a proportional reduction of 19% may not really translate into an absolute survival difference. So this is one example that I wanted to give about, and this is the actual calculation. The hazard rate I have calculated myself, everything else is from the NEJM paper. So this is what I wanted to tell you about hazard ratio. So the hazard ratio tells us the proportional reduction in the risk of in the risk of an event in one arm versus the other. But the absolute reduction is something else, and that is what I usually use to counsel my patients.
Excellent, Sudeep. Can we move to the next question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So from hazard ratio, and now I know next time when Senthil says hazard ratio, I know how to grill him. So my next question, let's move from hazard ratio to US FDA approvals. And I wanted to give you two examples. One is Solar One, which we just discussed in the panel. And the second is Olympiad study. If you see, both are US FDA approved in a metastatic breast cancer, alpelisib, and in germline mutation, olaparib. Just Solar One do not have OS data as yet. And Olympiad study, when the PFS data was presented, it was published in NEJM, the PFS of 7 months versus 4.2 months in the control arm. And the final OS data, when it was presented, it was published in Annals of Oncology. And there, the patient who did not receive prior chemotherapy, the hazard ratio of 0.5, while rest all TNBC, prior platinum, no prior platinum, all hazard ratio was more than 8 or even more than 0.8 or even 0.9. So my question to you, Sudeep, is I get confused about these US FDA approvals, and when Dr. Shona Nag and Dr. Govind Babu talks about alpelisib, how do you view these US FDA approvals, giving these two examples what I gave you just now?
So Amish, thank you very much for asking me that question. And before I launch into my take on those two approvals and those two studies, let me say that I deeply admire the US FDA, and all of us know that it essentially acts as a de facto regulatory body for much of the world, including in India, and that is because of the rigor with which they evaluate studies and data. And of course, in the recent times, their propensity to provide approvals has had lower thresholds compared to earlier. But with that said, I think I do admire the US FDA and the science that they bring to the table. By the very nature of the mandate and the American healthcare system, they do not conduct cost effectiveness analysis. So what I do is I look at the US FDA analysis of some of the data, but along with that, I also look at the UK NICE, and that I think completes or gives a more complete picture about any particular drug. So let me talk about alpelisib. That's what you asked me. So this is one of my favorite novels, is actually A Tale of Two Cities, and not only for the opening paragraph, but for the entire novel. So let me talk about A Tale of Two Trials. So the first one on top is, of course, the Bolero 2 that has been mentioned in passing, and at the bottom is the Solar 1. And of course, as you mentioned, in the Annals of Oncology, we also had the overall survival results of Bolero 2 published sometime later. So let me just show you, this is the data for Bolero 2 that I culled out from its various publications. So this was a study that was done in patients who had received a previous aromatase inhibitor and had disease progression. The treatment was exemestane with or without everolimus, and the pathway, shorn of all jargon, is essentially inhibition of AKT mediated signaling, which is a very important energy metabolism pathway. The PFS in the two arms in absolute terms was 10.6 versus 4.1 months, and the delta in PFS in absolute terms is 6.5 months. And of course, it was statistically significant. The PFS hazard ratio was 0.36, corresponding to a 64% reduction in the risk of death or progression. and the hazard ratio in the PIK3CA mutated subgroup was 0.51. The OS, when it was finally published, was 31 months versus 26.6 months with an absolute of 4.4 months. But this was not statistically significant with a hazard ratio of 0.89. And as you can see, it resulted, the drug causes mucositis, rash, fatigue, diarrhea, high blood sugars in a substantial fraction of patients. Now let me show you the corresponding data for SOLAR-1, exactly along the same parameters. So this was the patients who had received previous endocrine therapy and had disease progression. The treatment is fulvestrant with or without alpelisib. Again, the more or less the same pathway is inhibited. The PFS is 11 months versus 5.7 months. The absolute delta is 5.3 months. It is highly statistically significant. The hazard ratio is 0.65. And these are all PIK3CA mutated patients. We do not have the overall survival data, and you find side effects, mucositis, rash, fatigue, diarrhea, high blood sugars, almost identical. So, you know, we have these two pieces of data here. Amish, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Only thing is your bandwidth is low, but please go ahead, Sudeep.
Okay, perfect. So you know, this is SOLAR-1 and this is Bolero-2. And as you can see, these are the side effects, and the side effects are more or less the same, give or take a few percentage points. So, you know, then my own take on this whole data is that the excitement that was there initially with everolimus is now there with alpelisib, but I am not so certain that it's such a great drug, or that this pathway is really the pathway that one should try to inhibit, because it causes substantial toxicity. The progression-free survival benefit is not huge, and overall survival benefit was not there with everolimus. We will wait and see, but I will stick my neck out. I don't think that there will be a survival benefit. Let me take you back. The delta in PFS was 6.5 months. There was no overall survival benefit. Here, the delta in PFS is 5.3 months. The hazard ratio was 0.36 with everolimus. It is 0.65 with SOLAR-1. We will wait and see as to what happens to overall survival. So this is one editorial that I wrote at the time of Bolero-2, and I will just read it out. What this essentially means that small or moderate leads at the end of the first 200 meters of a 2-kilometer long race do not necessarily guarantee victor to the early leader. In fact, as history of metastatic trials show, more often than not, both the sprinters end up together. So therefore, should we care so much for an early lead when not even 1/10 of the race is complete? This is something to think about, and this is not necessarily true in every case, but still this is something to think about. The other example, olaparib, again a tale of two other trials, olaparib in metastatic breast cancer and olaparib in relapsed ovarian cancer, the SOLO-2 study. And as you have shown in the Olympiad trial, in the treatment of physician's choice, platinum was not allowed despite 70% of the patients being platinum naive. The overall, the PFS benefit was an absolute of 2.8 months with a hazard ratio of 0.58. But in overall survival, there was just a benefit of 2.2 months that was not significant, and actually there was no overall survival benefit. This is the olaparib in relapsed germline BRCA mutated ovarian cancer. You can see the huge difference in PFS, the huge difference 5.5 versus 19.1 months. And in this year's ASCO, there is also an overall survival benefit of about 13 months. So, you know, this is one way for me to look at, drugs that get recently approved, that have been recently approved, and how I incorporate them into my own clinical practice. But I do look at various aspects of a particular drug.
Thank you so much, Sudeep. And we move to the last question for this interview. In fact, your answers are so amazing that I feel like going on and on. My last question is, without any example, what do you or what are the criteria you consider when you change your practice? Of course, you have elicited few of these. In addition to that, what I wanted to ask you that, are there any other criteria when you are sitting in front of the patient and you have to tell the patient that, from today onwards, I'm changing my practice to this particular drug or this particular regime? And my last question, which I want you to touch upon, is at what cost or at what cost difference do you justify the new treatment? Sudeep.
Thank you, Amish. And because you had shared some of these questions with me earlier, I thought about some of them. And on this slide, I tried to jot down as to what I usually consider when I define my practice. So at the very top of my list is an overall survival benefit of substantial magnitude. And this, I would possibly recommend such a treatment to a patient, even if that treatment is toxic and is somewhat expensive. And of course, if the patient can't afford it, they can't afford it. But this is right at the top of my pyramid. Number two, I consider OS benefits of and reasonable costs. I then consider progression-free survival benefits of substantial magnitude with reasonable toxicity and reasonable cost. So, for example, the SOLO2 overall survival has just now been presented, but all along we had the data of SOLO2 PFS, and that would have prompted and did prompt me to change my practice, or at least advise my patients about that option. And number four, I consider similar survival with lesser costs and or substantially lesser toxicity or better convenience. And then at the very end, I do prefer treatments if I can use a new expensive drug in later line of treatment, if it will result in equivalent overall survival compared with the use of that drug in an earlier line, but reducing the overall duration of its use and the cost of treatment. So I think some of these points are also covered in the ESMO framework and in the ASCO value framework. But this is how I think about new treatments and how they change my thought about using them. And to your last question, there is no defined threshold for or cost threshold for recommending a new treatment. It of course depends on a personal discussion with the patient about her circumstances and what they can afford and what benefit will accrue in each case.
Great, Sudeep. Just the last point, what you said, a chance that use of a new expensive drug in later line will result equivalent overall compared to its use in earlier line. Are you referring to CDK4/6 inhibitor in the first line versus second line?
Yes, absolutely. You hit the nail right on its head, and that is my preference. Unless, of course, I'm compelled to use it in the first line for some reasons. But yes, you hit the nail right on its head. That is one very good example of how I look at those treatments.
Excellent, Sudeep. I wish we could go on and on. Kashish, do we have any time for any questions, or we need to move on?
So we've run out of time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Sudeep. And over to you, Kashish, for next panel.
Thank you so much, sir.